But with that, I want to recognize Mr. Case for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each and all of you for your service and your partnership. I agree. This is a good solid budget that responds to the times that we are living in, especially on the climate change side. Certainly in our House Appropriations Committee, where I'm also privileged to serve, to include the Commerce, Science, Justice Subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over at least NOAA and a number of the other agencies. We've tried to act on this budget. So refining the budget, refining the initiatives, I think is valuable. I want to just spend a little bit of time more driving a few points home in defense of the parts of our country that are not part of the continental United States. Because one of you made the comment on states west of the 100th meridian, and I paused for a second to think, okay, did they mean Hawaii as well? Obviously, we are west of the 100th meridian, but the point I want to make is that many of the national policies to include budgets and funding and focus of these programs often tend to focus on really the issues of the Western continental United States. And of course, we have a lot of parts of this country that are not the continental United States in general, nor are they part of the West. And there are a lot of misconceptions that often flow out of that mindset that people like me always have to kind of correct. And so I would encourage broader thinking there. And I would just make a couple of observations to make the point. In the Bureau of Reclamation, for example, you spoke to the importance of the Bureau in water projects. Okay, well, those are the big rivers and the big dams and the big reservoirs and the big distribution systems. We don't do that in Hawaii, nor does Puerto Rico do that, nor does Guam do that, nor does the Virgin Islands, nor does Samoa. We function on a different model. We function on a model of watershed. 20% of Hawaii is watershed. And that watershed captures the water and filters it down into aquifers, and we use those aquifers for our water, critical water. We don't get to divert water from one state to the other. We don't have Colorado River diversion discussions. We've just got what we got. And so the Bureau of Reclamation, when you administer, for example, your Water Smart program, I think it's valuable for you to always think about, hey, there's other ways that states and territories are dealing with water issues. So that would be kind of one example. Another example would be many of the programs having to do with invasive and critical species. Now, Fish and Wildlife and USGS both have a piece of this, and we appreciate the attention to our particular problems, but sometimes people do forget that when you're sitting on an island, the issues around dealing with invasive species and critical habitats are different from the Western United States. You're in your own little ecosystem, and that ecosystem has developed over a long period of time, and it is highly fragile. It is different from the Western, or for that matter, anywhere else in the continental U.S. ecosystem, and it can be affected very negatively, very fast from invasive species coming in. So the mechanisms that are available should be thought about and utilized a little bit more. From a NOAA perspective, we don't really particularly have an issue of NOAA not understanding the oceans. I mean, we're in the ocean. NOAA does world-class leading research in the oceans in Hawaii. If anything, the inverse is true, where perhaps there's less of an appreciation of the issues in the Western United States possibly from an oceans perspective. But also, we do world-leading research in atmospheric research out of NOAA in Hawaii, which is sometimes neglected in terms of the budgeting and the funding process. And then the final point I would make is we're talking about droughts here. And of course, the Western United States is in a terrible drought west of the 100th meridian, but so is Hawaii. And by the way, so are a number of the other places in our country that you wouldn't think would be drought susceptible nor drought consequences. We have one of the most severe droughts we've had in our history, recorded history in Hawaii right now. Now, we all think about Hawaii as being all this lush tropical rain, and how could Hawaii have a drought? Well, we have drought. And so sometimes that gets lost in the national discussion when we start thinking about how do we solve drought for the Western United States. We have our own drought, and we need different solutions. So So that's a long way of just making the comment, and there's not a question in there unless you would like to respond to my comment, that as you look at these programs, please think about how they impact, how the situation is different in different parts of the country, particularly parts of the country that do not fit the model of when these laws were actually enacted to start with. My time is up, so I guess you don't get to comment on my comment. But anyway, I appreciate your listening, and we'll be happy to work with all four of you on implementing a lot of these policies in a specific way.
I thank the gentleman